Hey everyone, and welcome to Ghosted But Make It Gay, the 18 plus podcast where things get creepy, chaotic, and just a little unhinged. I'm your host, Juno, and every week I dive into paranormal encounters, unsolved mysteries, myths, legends, and even cursed internet finds, trying to figure out if it's actually haunted or if we're all just delusional. Either way, don't expect a straight explanation. Hello and welcome, new and old listeners, to Ghosted But Make It Gay. I am your super gay and sometimes very horny host, Juno. And we are here because a bunch of people ignored every warning sign possible, and now we got to talk about Ouija boards. So, life update real quick. I got a raise at work, so that's cool. And I am excited to announce that I am finally going to hopefully get another car soon. So that's exciting, maybe. I think my mom's going to help me do that. So, um, one step at a time, we'll see what happens. But I've been feeling sick and burnt out recently. I actually came home from work early this past Monday, the 11th. And I'm recording this episode actually super late at night because I slept all day and had nothing better to do. So yeah. Other than that, my cat is great, and here we are. Last episode, we talked about haunted objects, which, you know, was already pretty creepy. It kind of set the atmosphere a little bit. But this time, we're talking about people actively trying to go out of their way to be dumb and contact stupid shit, which feels a lot worse. So let's just say if anybody out there is thinking about using a Ouija board or a spirit board without knowing the rules, maybe the science behind it, or you're a non-believer, you don't know how to protect yourself, just listen to this episode first, and then think about how you want to do that. So yeah, let's start the episode. All right, so Ouija boards, we all know what they are, right? I mean, if you're listening to my podcast, you probably know what they are. And if you don't know what they are, then I'm sorry. I really don't know how to help you. You should probably just look it up real quick. Um, but there are so many reasons that a lot of kids, teenagers, or people have probably used these when they were younger. Ouija boards were set up as a harmless marketing game for many companies, especially Hasbro. I believe Hasbro actually has a Ouija board game. I'm actually looking it up as we speak. Um, yeah, it's it's made by Hasbro. Mystifying Oracle Ouija. Like, can they be any more stupid? Not only that, but there are um a lot of popular horror movies as well that brought popularity around the Ouija board. Um, not only were there movies literally named Ouija and and Ouija Origin of Evil. But there's also the horror movie Veronica on Netflix that has to do with Ouija boards. There's a bunch of different movies like Paranormal Activity, Witchboard, and a few other like horror movies that just have Ouija boards in them. There's a lot of video games that you can use Ouija boards in, like Phasmophobia to contact the dead. And then there is I Am Zozo, which is a movie that is actually themed around the Ouija board demon, which we're actually going to talk about that in a bit. And there's a cultural like fear around Ouija boards and spirit boards and using them in general. And so all of that kind of creates this atmosphere about them specifically. And that's why we're doing them in a separate episode than just the haunted objects. So depending on who you ask, these are either fake pieces of cardboard or genuinely a portal to hell. And if you ask me, I actually have my own spirit board, and depending on how you use it, you can use it for good and you can use it for bad. And by bad, I mean bad juju. So you just have to know how to use it. Ouija boards have a lot of different like components to them. But before we talk about the rules and the like spirity side of it, let's talk about the science. All right. So if you started already touching your Ouija board, then you should probably just end this episode because there's no helping you now. I'm sorry. But yeah. But if you're like any other person that listens to a podcast, you're probably driving. So if you're using a Ouija board while you're in your car, get the fuck off the road. What are you doing? Thank you. Thank you. Anyways. So Ouija boards. So, what is the science behind them? Well, let's start with like our fascination with Ouija boards. For over 130 years now, Ouija boards have amazed and entertained people, frightened many, spooked households, and created this phenomena around just humans in general and provided psychologists with insights to people's body and mind. Or so Discover Magazine says in this article published October 25th, 2021. Ouija boards live up to an advertisement in an 1891 advertisement for a Ouija board proclaiming that for the scientific or thoughtful, its mysterious movements invite the most careful research and investigation, apparently forming the link which unites and the known with the unknown. The biggest science behind Ouija boards is the idiometer effect. Now, this is something that I believe a professor, Chris French, kind of talks about. So Chris French, a professor of psychology at Goldsmiths University of London, spent decades studying the science behind supernatural experiences, and Ouija boards was part of his undergrad experience. It used to be a regular Friday night entertainment for him that he recalls. He and his friends made their own Ouija board by writing the alphabet on a piece of paper and using an upturned wine glass as a planchette. I don't think any of us really believed that we were communicating with spirits, but it was great fun. French recalls the way that the wine glass really felt like it was moving by itself. The illusion that it is moving on its own is incredibly strong, he says. However, he adds that he and his friends were simply experiencing a long-known phenomenon called the idiometer effect. Basically, what that means is it's all subconscious, involuntary movements. Scientists first documented it in 1852. You often accidentally move a little bit if you think about a movement, says Mark Anderson. And Mark Anderson was an assistant professor at the Interacting Mind Center at Denmark Ars University. If you think about kissing your partner, for instance, you're inclined to just lean a little bit forward without really thinking about it. The same force is at work with Ouija boards. Participants think about the planchette moving, so they subconsciously move it themselves. Now, that does bring into the question, what about the answers, the questions and answers that we receive? Well, they also study that and talk about that. The movement of the planchette is only part of the Ouija board's mystery. What about the messages? Our subconscious minds are responsible for those too. Once it starts to spell something, inevitably, you're trying to guess even if you're not doing it consciously, says French. If you ask, what's your name? And it goes to the letter P and then E, you're automatically thinking Peter or, I don't know, Penny. What are other PE names? Whatever. Probably everybody else around the board is also thinking Peter, and that's what it is likely to be spelt out. So, Anderson published a study in 2018 looking at how these predictions play out in Ouija sessions. His team asked participants to wear goggles outfitted with cameras to track their eye movements. As a control, the participants were asked to spell the word Baltimore using the planchette. Their eye movement neatly anticipated the planchette's trajectory across the board as they looked at the letter where they were moving it. The participants then were asked to use the Ouija board normally, asking questions they came up with. In this part of the study, the individual participants weren't as good at looking at and predicting the next letter. But when the two participants' eye movements were analyzed together, they tended to be about as good at predicting the next letter as they had been when spelling Baltimore. Often, if you look at two people, says Anderson, one of them will have predicted the letter. Typically, he says the first letter is more likely to be random, then it becomes less and less random, so the likelihood that one of the participants can start predicting becomes much higher. So, this also then leads into their studies of like the power of our subconscious minds. Some Ouija board users have also reported that the board communicated things it shouldn't have been able to know, like facts that the participants themselves didn't even remember. A 2012 study suggests that this might be attributable to subconscious memory. In the study, participants used a Ouija board to answer yes/no trivia questions. Unbeknownst to them, each participant was flying solo. They were blindfolded, and their partner was part of the research team and took their hand off the planchette so that the participant was manipulating it alone. When faced with a question to which they weren't confident in the answer, participants guessed more correctly when they were supposedly receiving the answer from the Ouija board than when they were just answering the trivia questions themselves. Ronald Rensick, an associate professor of psychology and computer science at the University of British Columbia and one of the authors of the 2012 trivia study, says that the study's results might hint at the power of our subconscious minds. Rensick says, there's been more and more evidence that there's two systems, one which is conscious and one which is non-conscious, sometimes called the zombie mind. And when using a Ouija board, the conscious mind can take a back seat. Your conscious mind says, I'm just going to give up because I'm not in complete control, in which case your zombie system then takes over, he says. So, what can a Ouija board tell us? Well, Discover magazine continues the article with these professors and goes on to say, while Ouija boards might not let us communicate with the dead, there's a whole world of psychological insights that Ouija boards can provide. Our experiences with them can help scientists better understand subconscious memory, our sense of agency, and the zombie brain that takes over when you do mundane tasks. Before studying Ouija boards, Rensick worked for an automotive company, analyzing the way that people sometimes go into autopilot when driving. You've got your conscious mind, which kind of sets goals and tells the zombie system what to do, he says. Once you're on the freeway, your zombie system can handle that. Rensick suspects a link between automatic driving and the subconscious mind that comes out to play with a Ouija board. This may be what's behind Ouija, that there is an intelligence there, and that might be that intelligence that's driving your car. But is that just the science? Well, they aren't the only people that try to study the science behind the Ouija boards. The British Psychological Society on bps.org.uk also published a article in 2018 in July called "Clever Study Shows How Two Minds Interact to Create the Spooky Sense That a Ouija Board is Moving by Itself." And they also go on to talk about the idiometer factor, but there's also the voluntary condition in which they spell out letters and words given to them by the researchers. So this was, let me see here. Researchers traveled to a Ouija board conference and rigged up pairs of board users with eye tracking equipment. This is the first time the Ouija board practice has been studied outside of a psych lab. The 40 participants' eye movements were recorded in two conditions as they worked in pairs: when using the Ouija board in the usual way for 10 minutes, and in a voluntary condition in which they spell out the letters and words given to them by the researchers. This is by the same researchers. Anderson and his colleagues were interested in predictive eye movements in which the participants glanced to a letter ahead of the planchette landing on it. Unsurprisingly, individual participants made many more predictive eye movements in the voluntary condition. They knew where they and their partner were moving the planchette and frequently glanced ahead to the appropriate letter. These predictive eye movements were much rarer when using the Ouija board in the usual way. Much of our sense of ownership over our own actions comes from the fact that our brain predicts the consequences of them. So it follows that when participants were less able to predict the movement of the planchette in the usual Ouija condition, they felt less ownership over those movements. So the biggest takeaway is most studies show that we are controlling our own movements. But are we? I am a believer, personally. And I've used spirit boards and Ouija boards before. And I've seen planchettes move by themselves. So, that being said, I don't think that has anything to do with the fucking idiometer effect. But I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm just here to give you the facts and let you decide. With the science out of the way, and the actual terms, the other things that we can think about are group influence and fear amplifying the experiences, right? So you might be using a Ouija board somewhere where you think is haunted. So you already have this, awareness of where things would have already been happening. And now if you have a group influence there that also have experienced supernatural stuff in their lives, and they're doing a Ouija board where it's haunted, now there's already this expectation that something is going to happen because they've created this, feeling and emotion amongst the group already. Now, something that I can tie in as someone that's neurodivergent is, I'm already hyper aware and get anxious very easily. And if you're already hyper aware and get anxious very easily, your brain can start connecting like every little noise and movement afterward to the Ouija board, right? So after you use a Ouija board, if you experience this idiometer effect or any other, thing that's happened in that room during that time and then after, you're going to attribute it to the Ouija board, right? Because your brain's already going to be overthinking. Now, logically, that all makes sense, right? But what happens to the people after they do the Ouija board and it's been like weeks and things are still happening, right? Well, some of those people probably didn't follow the rules. And yes, there are rules to Ouija boards. And that's where we get into the spiritual side of this episode. We're going to transition right into how to use a Ouija board, starting with the history. I just want to apologize if I have some awkward pauses this episode because I am just a little tired and also wired on caffeine at the same time. Um, I'm feeling a little bit better than I was when I was at work. I felt like very feverish, and I'm hoping that I don't feel like this when I wake up in the morning, but we'll see. But moving on, the history and ultimate guide to Ouija boards, as explained by Kimberly Miller from medium.com. The Ouija board, also known as a spirit board or talking board, traces its origins back to the late 19th century. And its creation is often attributed to Elijah Bond, who was a lawyer from Baltimore, who, along with his associates, patented the board in 1890. The name Ouija itself is said to be a combination of the French and German words for yes, oui and ja. So Ouija or Ouija. A Ouija board's popularity soared during the spiritualist movement of the 19th and early 20th century. And spiritualism, a belief system that held that the dead could communicate with the living through mediums, created a fertile ground for the Ouija board's growth. So what is the Ouija board? So the board itself features a printed alphabet arranging from A to Z, arranged in 2 rows, and then numbers 1 through 9, or 0 through 9, usually displayed in a row beneath the letters. And then additionally, there is a yes, no, hello, and goodbye, which are often positioned in the corner of the boards. And accompanying the board is a planchette, which is like normally a triangular wooden piece of a wooden piece that goes on top of the board that has a hole cut out into it. And the planchette slides across the board and will align with a letter wherever like the hole lands. So how it works, there is the belief and scientific explanation. Many people who use Ouija boards believe that planchette movements are guided by spirits or supernatural forces. And however, scientific explanations attribute these movements to idiometer effect rather than paranormal activity. But those perspectives are still at battle to these days. Now, there are different types of Ouija boards. There are traditional wooden Ouija boards. There are the modern plastic ones. And then there are like custom artistic Ouija boards. each Ouija board does the same thing. They are mainly just style, but the traditional wooden ones are said to be the ones that hold the most energy, from the timeless look and artwork, and they're going to be the ones that give off that more aesthetic, creepy vibe, right? Now, how do you use a Ouija board? Well, that's where we get into the rules. First things first, you never want to use a Ouija board alone. And if you do, you want to make sure that you have white candles lit at a space that's above you. So at a shelf that's above you where you're sitting below the candle. These white candles will help keep the board and you protected from malicious entities. You normally want to keep everything dim. And you want to, if you can, what I've done in the past, use the Ouija board in a circle of salt to also protect yourself from negative entities, inviting in only positive stuff. Or you could also form a circle with candles and or people and inviting in positive emotions and the elements and things like that. And then the other thing is, if you are a believer, you can use a Ouija board during the witching hour, which is the time at which the veil between the human and spirit world are the thinnest, which is at 3 a.m. 3 to 4 a.m. So that hour time frame. I had to look it up to be sure, because I always forget. And then the rules when using a Ouija board. Don't joke around. Ouija boards are supposed to be serious, so you have to remain respectful and cognizant of the potential consequences. Be intentional. Just like anything else when it comes to spiritual, witchcraft, anything that has to do with psychic manifestation, things like that, you want your intentions there. You want them aligned with the people that are also using the board. If you're playing alone, be very clear about where your headspace is at. If you're doing this at a time of grief and discomfort, you're probably going to get bad vibes from the board. If you're doing this in a more positive headspace, then that's probably going to be better for you. Your psychological mood is really going to affect the spirit realm. Whether you believe the spirit realm or not, psychological, whatever your mindset is going to have a hold on you in all areas of your life. And if you don't believe in the spirit realm, but then you use a Ouija board when you're not in a psychologically good spot, then you might start attributing bad things moving forward to the Ouija board. Rule number 4, if the planchette starts to count down or go through all the letters, you stop immediately. Normally, it should already be a red flag when Ouija boards start moving wildly out of control, but if it starts rapidly counting down or quickly moving through all the letters, this means one of two things. 1, the spirit can escape, or 2, you contacted a demon or an evil spirit. Other signs are if the planchette makes a figure 8 or infinity sign, and if they identify as Zozo. You need to stop immediately. And you quickly and loudly say goodbye. And only once you have said goodbye, and only once you have stated that you want to end the session, take the planchette off the board. 5, don't believe anything and everything that is being said. Obviously, if it's involuntary movements that are subconscious or things that are being said by spirits, whether malicious or good, you have to be careful what you believe that are coming from the spirit board. Never use this Ouija board in your own home. That's going to bring all that energy to you. But also, don't use a Ouija board in a graveyard. I did that once. Short story time. Did a Ouija board or spirit board in a graveyard with my two friends. And it spelt out a name when we asked who we were talking to, and then it spelt out run, and we left. And in the next couple of weeks, me and my friends kind of experienced some stuff, and it kind of ended, but it was not just not good energy, honestly. Write things down. Taking notes is a good thing to follow when you're doing the Ouija board, especially because if you were to do another session later on, you can refer back to the notes. And if you can cross-reference your notes and things aren't matching up, then you're either not talking to the same spirit or they're lying to you. You want to have different things to communicate to spirits as well, other than just the Ouija board. So other conductors like candles, scents, and liquids, pendulums. You know, if you are into like the electromagnetic stuff, so like the EFM, I think, readers, like Ghost Hunter tech. And then never burn a Ouija board. Even if you become super scared of the Ouija board or if something's happened, don't ever burn it. Normally, if you burn it, burning it will release the spirit, and normally the spirit will attach itself to the last place that it talked at. So don't do that. Always, 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 always say goodbye. That should be pretty obvious, but some people forget. Whenever you're ending a session, always loudly say goodbye. Politely, or say that we are now ending the session, but always say goodbye verbally somewhere in that. Whenever you're done, you want to cleanse the room in some way with incense, some type of wood bundle, some type of sage. Be careful of the sage that you use. Certain sages are closed practices. Don't ever leave the planchette on the board by itself. That's where I've seen it move by itself. And don't ever ask about death. So don't ever ask when you will die or how the spirit that you're talking to died, things like that. Now, one of the rules did mention Zozo. Who or what is Zozo? Well, Zozo is often described as a malevolent presence that communicates through Ouija boards exclusively or mainly. It'll normally and typically introduce itself by spelling out its name repeatedly and quickly as Zozo or Zaza or Mama. It'll move the planchette in a rapid figure 8 pattern, spell out vulgarities, obscenities, threaten to harm whoever's playing or their families, or create an overwhelming sense of dread or nausea in the room. The origin of the legend of the Zozo goes back to the 19th century reference in the Dictionary of Infernal in 1818. A French demonology encyclopedia by Jacques Colin de Plancy mentions Zozo in connection with a girl allegedly possessed by several spirits, Zozo, Mimi, and Crapula. Though details are scarce, it marks one of the earliest recorded mentions of the name. And then a rise in the 2000s, Zozo reemerged in paranormal culture through the writings of Darren Evans, who claimed to have repeated and terrifying encounters with the demon via Ouija boards. Evans described Zozo as a manipulative, violent, and persistent, often threatening his family. He He shared his stories online in 2009, sparking a flood of similar accounts. And then pop culture spread as people claimed Zozo encounters, and then there was even that movie created. Now, why are Ouija boards the gateway to Zozo? Or Ouija board and them being the gateway to Zozo? To understand Zozo's rise, it helps to look at the Ouija board itself. It was marketed in the late 19th century as a parlor game. The Ouija was never meant to summon demons. It was sold by the Kennard Novelty Company in 1891 as a mysterious talking board to let people communicate with spirits. The board exploded in popularity during times of grief and uncertainty during World War I and the Great Depression. But with popularity came superstition, and religious groups began warning the Ouija boards weren't harmless games, but portals to darker realms. And by the mid 20th century, horror films like The Exorcist cemented the board's association with possession. And that started with other things like Zozo. So it's no coincidence that Zozo slowly became an entity that was defined by its attachment to the Ouija sessions. Now, there are things that you can do if you encounter Zozo. So, repetition of the name, the figure 8 motion, dark messages, things like that. What do you do if you encounter Zozo? Well, you cleanse yourself. You stop the session. You say goodbye. You want to make sure that you're not inviting it into yourself or into your home and things like that. And yeah, I don't really know how else to really, I guess, warn you about Zozo. Other like entities that you could invite in with the Ouija board, I guess, would be like from other cultures, the jinn, the pazuzu, the different poltergeists, different trickster spirits from the from indigenous Native American lore. Dybbuk's, we talked about that from Dybbuk boxes. Letter spirits from China, or different modern like digital spirits. So figures like Slenderman or Momo are internet folklore, but because we've created fear and belief and repetition surrounding them, that folklore has been given manifestation and form and has also gained power. So you never want to invite that stuff into a Ouija board session. Never, 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 never. So, yeah. Now, what brings people to even be using a Ouija board? Well, besides it being a parlor game, and even if you know all the rules, me as someone that's gay, you have this vulnerability about asking things to something that doesn't even know you if something's wrong with you. You know, the sense of loneliness and curiosity about yourself can create this energy of like, you know, what if, and creates this more vulnerable atmosphere, and that kind of leads you into the unknown and, you know, wanting answers from things that may be out of your control. And that's my gay tie-in, because that's kind of what started me on my path of witchcraft, is me being gay and being a witch kind of go hand in hand, because it feels more right to be an eclectic witch and spiritualist and all of that than anything else, especially because I'm gay. Now, though we've talked about the logical and we've talked about the spiritual, let's talk about the actual. Well, as best as the actual as we can get. And that means story times. So, as always, I went looking for stories from people who swear they have had experiences on Reddit. And if you've had experiences with the supernatural pertaining to this episode, last episode, next episode, any of that, please send it to me. And we'll go over how you can send that to me at the end of this episode. But let's get right into the stories. All right, so I just found an ant on me. But my apartment's pretty clean for the most part. I'll have a bunch of random shit lying around. That's wild, dude. Okay. Alrighty. So, let's get into the story, shall we? So, I have 4 stories pulled up here. That'll lead us to the end of the episode. So, let's begin. People who have used a Ouija board. What's the scariest response you've gotten? One commenter says, This one was scary to me. My mom and aunt used the board after their dad died. He had remarried, but had told their daughters that he was leaving them a few things in his will, including some money. His second wife was an executor and was saying he hadn't left them money, etc., etc. Executor. Sorry, I can't remember exactly what she apparently said. Anyway, Mom and her sister thought it was possible the money wasn't left to them after all, like second wife said, but my aunt was really strapped for cash and they felt like it was possible second wife was withholding info and money. They apparently managed to get their dad via the Ouija board and asked him whether he had left them money in his will. It spelt out a 3-letter acronym for a bank, and then a series of numbers. Turns out he did. And he had a bank account with money in it intended for his daughters. The account matched the bank acronym and account number. This one spooked me because the details were a surprise to my mom and my aunt. I don't know how they could have got that info out of thin air. Ooh, I hope that my spooky spirit daddy also gives me money. You know, hopefully one day, this will be ordinary. Has anyone else heard that song? That's from the Zombies movie, Disney. Love that movie. Anyways, moving on. Ouija boards are not to be fucked with. I purchased a Ouija board from Amazon thinking it was bullcrap and had some friends over and we popped it out. 3 of us with our hands on it and we're asking questions. Nothing happens. We leave the slider on the board and leave the room. Come back and the slider was slid off the board onto the floor. Needless to say, we were pretty freaked out. Ever since then, my house has come to life. I've seen dark masses peeking around corners multiple times. I look and it goes away and then it appears when I look away. My parents and brother have also said they've seen and heard weird things since then. Their name being called when no one calls it. My brother claimed his phone charger slid across the floor. I had a different friend over a few weeks ago and he woke up in the middle of the night and saw a tall dark figure standing in the doorway watching him sleep. I asked everyone in the house and it wasn't them. And last night is the tipping point. I woke up at around 3:15 and saw a dark figure at the end of my bed. No face or distinct features, just a very big darker than the darkness, as it was no light in my room, and disappears, and I felt so cold. I managed to go back to bed and woke up throwing up this morning. I don't know what I brought into my house, but let this be a warning. Ouija boards are not to be fucked with. Edit. I got my brother and his girlfriend to do it with me to tell it to leave, and this time it moved. I do not think they we're moving it. I asked what are you, and it instantly went to BZB. I'm not sure who that could be. None of us know anybody with those initials. We all told it we don't want it here and to leave and said goodbye. I hope that is enough to make the strange things stop happening. Well, I'm not sure what BZB means. My instant thought goes to like Beelzebub. Has like initials. Imagine if like Beelzebub's like, hey, BZB in the house. What is up, dude? That's crazy. But I think Lord Beelzebub would have better things than to torment someone on a Ouija board, you know? But OP, good luck. Moving on. This happened to me when, don't ever use the Ouija board. This happened to me when I was in high school. I was at my friend's house at the time who lived in an apartment building. She had a neighbor who lived upstairs and was a few years younger than us, who we hung out with when I visited my friend's apartment. On this specific day, my friend's neighbor mentioned that she had a Ouija board and asked if we wanted to use it with her. We both agreed, as I personally didn't think Ouija boards were actually paranormal and thought it was a myth. We went into a garage area of the apartment building and put our fingers on the planchette. For the first few hours, nothing really eventful happened. Eventually, we had movement on the planchette and started asking questions to this quote-unquote spirit who would answer us. I forgot who, but someone asked if the spirit was trying to communicate with any of us. Interestingly enough, it spelled out my name. I was skeptical and thought it was one of my friends messing with me, so I asked what its name was. It then spelled out my grandmother's name, who died 6 months before this Ouija board encounter. I started getting a little uncomfortable, as my grandmother's name is in another language. My friends did not know this language, nor have I ever told them what her name was. They wouldn't even know how to spell it either. Weirded out, I asked what my grandmother wanted. She started spelling out URGR. And then the planchette started going in weird circles and even going off the board and was not spelling out anything that made sense. So I asked for further clarification and then just said, "You are great. This will be important later, so keep this in mind." Anyway, I just thought it was just us moving it weirdly and then said goodbye. A few days later, my grandmother's husband, my grandfather, suddenly passed away. It was unexpected, as he was in great health and was right before Christmas and was so excited for Christmas. As I was at his funeral, I remembered sitting there thinking about the Ouija board, and that's when it hit me. When the Ouija board, or my grandmother, initially tried to spell out something that started with GR, I realized that grandfather starts with GR. But then the planchette moved around weirdly when my grandmother couldn't spell out the rest of the word, as if something was stopping my grandmother from completing the word and warning me. The next few months was hell, as I started blaming myself and was convinced that I somehow contributed to my grandfather's death by using this board. It got to the point that I became suicidal, and the scary part is, my thoughts felt as if it wasn't me. It felt as if something was trying to lead me to taking my life, as if they were very dark. I can't explain it, as it might have been guilt, but I felt like something was watching me all the time, and I felt a strange presence in the next few months after using the board. There was also the fact that the night of when I used the Ouija board, I was in the bathroom and I was underneath some lights. I had a strange feeling and felt that I needed to walk away. Right when I did, the lights shattered and would have injured me if I was standing underneath. I eventually confessed to my mother about the Ouija board experience, and right when I did, I felt a giant weight off my shoulders. The negative and dark thoughts were slowly disappearing. I started to not feel the dark presence anymore when I overcame these thoughts. However, I was still wondering if the spirits I contacted to was even my grandmother. I also wondered if I was imagining this dark presence and the dark thoughts I had. Fast forward, I was at an overnight event at my school and another friend brought a Ouija board. I decided to use it once more with this friend and find some answers. At one point, the Ouija board said it was trying to contact me specifically. When we asked who it was, it started to spell out DEV. We started panicking, but then it spelled out to a word that I forgot. I dismissed it and thought it was nothing. But my friend decided to look up the word. A few weeks later, she told me the word meant devil in another language. It was confirmed to me that it might not have been my grandmother who was contacting me the first time. There was also the fact that there may have been something that was trying to get to me, and it did not have good intentions. To this day, I am convinced that this spirit only tried to warn me about my grandfather so that when he passed, I would have felt guilty. By feeling guilty, I was more vulnerable to the spirit's influences, to the point that I would almost have taken my life. I do not know if this was actually happening, but it's the only logical explanation I have. Ooh, OP. Okay. So, yeah, that goes back to our rules of the Ouija board. Do not believe the stuff that's coming off the Ouija board. Spirits and dark entities can always get information out of you, even if you don't realize it. Positive thoughts and positive memories are going to be the hardest for them to pull, right? So they can only get surface level things. So if you have like a really positive memory and you use that as a way to like figure out if a spirit's real by asking it about that memory, that's going to be like your best chance, but sometimes that's even not worth it. So be careful. And then the final story. We played with a Ouija board. We are shaking. Hello, guys. I will tell something that just happened an hour ago. I can write this when I can finally write this now that I've stopped shaking. I'm scared as fuck to the point me and my friend cried because of fear. First of all, I'm not lying. I swear on God and on my life that everything I say is true. Also, neither I nor my friend moved the Ouija thing. We swore on God that none of us did it because we didn't believe each other in the beginning. We just wanted to play because we wanted to have fun and didn't really think it would be real. In the beginning of the game, it wasn't moving at all. We were just calling some spirits, and we're saying things like, "Is there a spirit?" or "Are you there?" and so on. Then suddenly, that spirit said their age, and they were middle-aged. We asked if they were a woman, and she said yes. We asked if she was related to us, and she said high school. Mind you, two of our friends' mothers from our old high school passed away. One passed away 3 years ago, and other one passed away 3 months ago. The recent one was also my mom's friend from over 15 years. Then I asked her that, "Are you the mother of X, the woman who died 3 years ago?" And she said no. I asked, "What is your name?" And she spelled E and then L, which were the first letters of her name. We got shocked. Anyways, this woman said one of our friends' name, and we were, why does she say her name? And then I remembered that girl's mom went to see her to read some religious verses and stuff to make her feel relieved before she passed away. And right after this woman said Shahada, she gave her last breath and died. So I thought this dead woman wanted to thank her for this because my country isn't Islamic religious country, and in my country, even though people say that they are Muslims, nobody knows anything about religion. So when this religious woman came before she passed away, she was relieved so much. Guys, I can't tell. Later, she started saying that I heard a noise. Right after she was done with it, there was 2 loud sounds at home and something dropped very loudly. We screamed like crazy, and I couldn't even look at anywhere because I was hiding my face, and we started crying. Then my friend screamed, "Goodbye, goodbye." And after I was like, "Are you here?" She said no. But she said no, so I was like, "You are here." And I was saying, "Look, you are my mom's best friend, and I cried so much for you, and we loved you a lot. Please don't hurt us." And she went to the word goodbye. Then I called my boyfriend, and he said, "Play Yasin on phone." So I put it, and other more Soras. I'm so scared, guys. I want to leave this freaking house. I cannot stand it. I'm so scared, and things... They are like ranting at the end of this. OP. It is okay. As long as you said goodbye, as long as you're not inviting it into your home, and as long as you're, true to yourself, I'm sure you'll be okay. They are like freaking out. This is 17 days ago. This is like actually most recent. OP, if you're listening to this, I think you'll be okay. If things persist, then I'm so sorry because I don't know how to help you. And yeah, that's it for, the stories. So, you know, let's start to close out this episode, right? So honestly, I think everyone knows someone out there that probably has a Ouija board story, or you have a Ouija board story, which is concerning, especially if you're doing it without knowing what Ouija boards can do. And most of them are probably fake. You might think they're probably fake. Or maybe people keep telling the same stories for a reason. So, I'll leave you with this. A traditional opening chant for Ouija boards. As friends we gather, hearts are true, spirits near, we call to you. Ouija, are you there? All right. So, next time, we are leaving the house and probably a lot of the normal areas entirely when it comes to where we're taking the next topic. We are going to be looking somewhere in the backwoods, maybe desert area. I mean, sleep paralysis demons weren't enough. Ouija board demons weren't enough. So next time we'll be discussing things that mimic people. That's right. We're going to be talking about skinwalkers and wendigos. And saying those names out loud is already a curse in itself. But I'll be doing y'all a treat and taking it upon myself to talk about them while repeatedly saying it so that you don't have to. So, thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you all listening this far. Love you all. If you had an experience like any of these other Ouija board experiences and you want me to share it in my next episode, or in later segments where we just do random story times as we get listener episodes in, please send them to my podcast email, ghostedbutgay@gmail.com. That is ghostedbutgay@gmail.com. ghostedbutgay@gmail.com. I would say you could also find me on Reddit to send me some stuff, but Reddit somehow or for some reason shadow banned me. I don't know. I sent them 2 appeals to see what's going on. Probably homophobic. If anything, I'm going to delete my account and just make a new one and start over for Reddit. It is what it is. But that being said, I can't wait for the next episode. I'll see you all next week. So yeah, bye-bye.